Good evening, croeso, hello, and welcome to the first of our cafe conversations in the new Cafe Christmas. So, what I normally do is I normally have my phone on as well. I was just taking a drink of water. Are we all there? If you are there, please, 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 can you say hello? Because on my screen I have nobody viewing, but that could take a while. Okay, I am live. Hi, Jenny. Are we all well? Okay, I'm wearing a t-shirt, a sweatshirt today that somebody bought for me in class. How about that? Pilates is my happy hour. It's quite nice, isn't it? Anyway, I was going to wear just my sweatshirt, but it's parky. So the coat is staying on. Nothing like a long gilet to keep you nice and warm. All right, so in the cafe, I would think the one thing that makes a cafe unique are the podcasts, as I call them, or the talks, or cafe chat, whatever you want to think about them. And they started in lockdown, and I think that's when I started to discover my kind of love of teaching and, going back to my roots, as they say. And I think I've always been a natural teacher. I love being a mother and having kids and whatever. So in this cafe, I've got a theme of Christmas. All right. So the kind of things that I think of at Christmas are this. In my own personal life, I've had the most magical, perfect Christmases, and I've had horrific Christmases as well. And I think that, when you've had that pressure for everything to be nice and you're not in a happy place, it's a very stressful place to be. And also, if you are a working person and you're trying to make this perfect Christmas, or I think the emphasis on having to be happy is very prominent at Christmas, and also to be in coupley things. Because if you're not in a coupley thing, you could quite easily find yourself alone at Christmas, which I have done when my father saved the day. Um, and and I think that it's a kind of thing that plays on my mind, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this. So over the next 4 weeks in the cafe chat, we're going to look at the things that come up at Christmas that take a little bit more prominence than at other times of life. And the first thing we're going to talk about is food, because already if you go in the supermarket, you are inundated with buying chocolates and buying, you know, treatful things. And I don't know about you, right? I love Marks and Spencer's, but a turkey at Marks and Spencer's is £150. And I'm thinking, like, that's a lot of money for one meal, let alone with everything else, without the wine or anything else. And and I think that we're under pressure to cook a lot, or to have everything at hand, because the shops are shut for like 2 days maybe, or one day even. And I wanted to address the food issue in terms of health. Okay, so I've had my little rant about things being out. So if I'm saying stuff that you think that's quite interesting, or you want to comment, please do so. So whether you're listening on your headphones or whether you're sitting in front of your computer, I might have to take this top off because it's rustling, isn't it? I will take it off because it's gonna annoy me every time I move that it's going to be rustling, and I've got lots to get through today. All right, so as you know, I always waffle on for the first 5 minutes, and that's simply because it takes a while for everybody to settle in and get ready for the talk and tune in and make sure that you're all online. Now, as you always know, I script my talks, or I give myself bullet points so that I can make sure I cover all the points. This goes with the first week, and everything within this first week is about understanding how our body responds to things. So how we respond to stress, how we respond to food, how we respond to exercise. And the nutrition element is really important, as if you ever do a personal trainer course, so say if you wanted to become a personal trainer, you would have to do a nutrition module. So you have to do things like, how to use the gym, how to program, how to offer food tips to your client who 9 times out of 10 wants to lose weight. And I'm always hesitant about losing weight. I hate the term losing weight because it's meaningless. All right. And I was thinking of Sian today, in particular, Sian, and I wanted to say this to you. When you step on the scales, you weigh everything, okay? Your hair, your ears, your nose, what's in your stomach. And fat takes up more room. All right. So sometimes when we're on a weight loss journey, we look different, but we weigh the same because muscle is dense. And so when you build muscle mass, your scales might not change, but your body has. And so with food, we're going to be looking at, if I eat this type of food, what happens to my body? And the thing I find that people say to me all the time is that they're tired. Okay, I'm tired. Oh, I would come to class, but I haven't got the energy at the end of the day. When I come home from work, all I want to do is to sit down and have a rest. Now, to me, that's a danger sign. That's like, hang on. You can't just be so exhausted after 8 hours of sitting at a desk that all you need to do is rest. That's to do with stress, which we're going to talk about. But today is about how we understand the influence that eating food does to our energy system. And in particular, if you're over 40. Are we ready? How many people have I got online? 20. That looks good. I've got 0 on here. All right. Right, excuse me while I read away, and hopefully it will make sense. So what I was talking about was that nutrition shapes your energy. Now, I talked about this on Sunday in the retreat day, that shaping is now becoming a scientific term about how we go from one place to another in a goal setting. So today we're going to have a look at how we can shape our energy. And I like the word shape, even though it feels a bit odd word, because it means that you are making something. You know, I like making bread. So, you know, when I'm making bread, I know I have to knead the dough to break down the gluten in order to make the bread. And if I didn't knead the dough, it would just be flat. You know, it wouldn't be very good. So we're going to have a look at things about how our blood and our glucose control things, how when we eat affects our cortisol, affects our insulin, affects our thyroid, and how we can keep a more stable energy so that we're still motivated, that after long days of work, we can come back and we can do some cafe exercise. We're going to have a look at the way proteins and complex carbohydrates and healthy fats keep us healthy and keeps our cholesterol under control. We're also going to have a look at estrogen. As you know, we've got 109 people in the group, and we've got 3 men. No, we've got 4 men, including my husband. And you know, it's a really good thing to have a look at how do we get simple, balanced meals that don't crash our energy and really help us to think. So this today is going to be focusing on nutrition, hormonal balance, or if you want to call it the endocrine system, and your heart health. So I think it's called Food, Heart and Hormones. I was trying to think of a H for food. If you can think of a H for food, because you know, like me, I like Functional Fitness Friday and Metabolic Monday morning. So if you can think of a H for food, let me know. And we're going to have a look at how our diet, not going on a diet, how what we eat influences our endocrine system, influences our metabolism, and really improves our heart health. And all of this, as you know, comes from quite fairly recent research. But I am going to look at a study called the Framlington study, which is one of the biggest studies into heart and females going through menopause that has ever been undertaken. It wasn't started out to be about menopause, but they looked at women in their 30s and they kept measuring them up until their 70s. So we know that when we understand the biology of how the body functions, it changes the way that we shape our lifestyle. For example, these days, on a packet of cigarettes, you have a gross picture saying like, these will cause you cancer. Now, if you look at my mother's generation, people were given cigarettes in order to lose weight, a bit like Ozempic, you know? So it's a way that we're changing our lifestyle. We also know that when you are over 40 and you start your menopausal transition, it's not only about what you have always eaten, but how that changes where you make the decisions about what to eat. So we talked about the Framington study, and that was done in 1993, and it really looks at the way that menopause, okay, and that means anything over the age of 45, influences cholesterol, metabolism, and the way that we have to reconsider how we eat. Okay, so we're going to still stick with the evidence, but also we're going to be kind to ourselves, and we're going to think like, look, this stage of life, a bit like a baby, you know, we need to think about how what we eat, when we eat, changes how we feel. So the first thing we're going to look at is called blood glucose. Okay, so that's related to type 2 diabetes and insulin sensitivity. Cortisol, that's related to stress, and thyroid interaction. So you all now know that I didn't have a low thyroid problem up until I reached menopause. They think probably it was the trauma of the surgery I had and the stress I went through. So I went from having no thyroid problems to having now on one of the highest doses for thyroxine that is required. Let's have a look at blood glucose first. So blood glucose is our key indicator for energy system. So when we're exercising, like we're doing barbell workout or dumbbell workout, we need to, when we move muscle, we need to have it energy. Okay, so think of it like putting petrol in the car. And the way that we do that looks at our hormonal balance. When we have a look at the way that when we eat and when we exercise, looks at maybe how we're going to get our blood sugar right. And I'm going to use an example here of working with the Welsh women's rugby team. So these girls now and women were at the top of their game. Okay, they've been chosen to play for Wales. They came from all different parts of Wales, North Wales, South, East, West, all to Cardiff for a training system. And we used to find they'd get low blood sugar. We couldn't work out what was going on. And what we were finding out was, because they were thinking like they had to be thin, they weren't eating much. And then, because they thought that they had to exercise, what they would do is eat chocolate. So eating chocolate has this kind of influence on your blood sugar. When you eat chocolate, you get a massive dose of sugar into your body that then insulin comes in to try and regulate it to get it back down to like an even number that it needs it to be. But it's not accurate, and so often it would push your blood sugar down. So if you ate your chocolate bar half an hour before training, you would probably have a blood sugar crash. But if you ate your sugar 5 to 10 minutes before your exercise, you should be okay. So we're going to have a look at that. And when we know that this happens, okay, and then if you're stressed and anxious, your body also demands more energy. Your muscles become more tense, you become more alert, you demand more energy. It will use the sugar up in your bloodstream straight away. On top of that, we have a look at the way that thyroid influences the way that we can be alert and use that sugar well. It's a really interesting kind of system about how things work together. So keeping a consistent time or a consistent meal plan really helps to keep your glucose stable. We're going to have a look at stress later on, but now we're going to have a look at how do we manage our glucose before we exercise. And there's a few things that you can think about. So your blood glucose is stored in 3 places. In your blood, okay? And your body measures how much glucose is in your blood. If you are a diabetic, you actually take a sample of your blood and you measure the sugar level. When your sugar level drops low, your body goes into a stress response and it releases adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol in order to stimulate the endocrine system to release glucose from the storage. All right, so if you're like me, I'm a pathetic person. I have one, box of tissues out on the go and one in storage. And when I swap the one from storage, I order a new one. That's how your body works as well. So the first place for storage is in the muscle cell itself. And then the second place for storage is in the liver. Now, in the liver, we have to release a third hormone called glucagon to release the sugar from the liver, because we don't want to be going into there, because that sugar is kept for brain activity. So when we exercise, we want to make energy, okay, in the blood, in the muscle cell itself, and that requires fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. First place it's going to go to is blood, because it's right around all the muscle, it's flowing past all the time, it can pick up the sugar immediately, all right? So you can work and you can pick up the sugar. Now, as long as the work level is fairly steady and constant, maybe like going for a walk, this kind of system works well. Once your blood sugar levels drop down a little bit, the brain signals the hormones to release sugar from storage. That then comes back into the blood system. Now, this takes a while. So if you've ever had a low blood sugar episode, and I had terrible low blood sugar, I was hospitalized with low blood sugar, it takes about 20 minutes. All right, it takes about 20 minutes for the storage to come out and get your blood sugars back to normal. So we don't want to constantly just burn sugar, because it's like it goes really quickly. So our body can also use protein and fats. Now, these can only be burned in the presence of sugar anyway. We want to burn fat, and it goes through this cycle. Okay, it's called the Krebs cycle, where we start to exercise, we start burning sugar, and then the body realizing we're still going, and it goes, we need more than instant energy, we need longer term power. We need to get into the fat stores. And so the body then triggers, through the release of the hormones, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol, to release what they call triglycerides or fat into the bloodstream. And your body then uses both the fat and the sugar to create energy, which is great, because we often call it fat burning. And that is exactly what you're doing. You are burning the fat when you are exercising. Now, if you were a normal, is there such a thing? If you were a normal, healthy person, your fat burning starts roughly, I hate to say this, after 20 minutes of constant exercise. Hence why I'm always telling you, go for a walk afterwards, because you're in prime fat burning energy systems and you do not want to switch that off. So adding that extra 10 minutes, okay, I'm going to talk about cortisol, keeps your fat burning profile up. And your fat burning profile can stay up to 2 hours after hard exercise, as long as you don't eat sugar. So when we come into fat burning, the more times we exercise for more than 20 minutes, the quicker that system comes into being. All right, so it moves a bit quicker. Like I said, doing anything, you know, if you ever learned to knit, you know, to begin with, it's like really slow, and then you can knit and talk. It's the same kind of thing. It's like driving your car. The body follows that same pattern. So it releases glucose, we use the glucose, we're running out of glucose, we need more energy, we have fat. We start burning fat, 20 minutes. As you get fitter or more frequently active, your fat burning starts earlier. And there's a lovely famous study about Paula Radcliffe that was done in Manchester in the 1980s, and she could go into fat burning within 30 seconds of running. And she was seen as like a freak of nature, which is why she could run and run and run and run and run and never run out of energy. And she was very thin because she was always fat burning. So this morning I told you about EPOC. So EPOC is where we are recovering from exercise and the muscle needs to repair. So when we repair muscle, we still need fat, proteins and carbohydrates. And we can keep fat burning if we don't eat sugar. Because the minute the sugar goes into our stomach, it goes straight into our bloodstream. And the minute the sugar levels in the bloodstream come up a little bit, the hormones that release the fat stop. Within minutes, within like 5 minutes. So when you have finished your exercise, you want to be drinking water and you want to try and remain active for at least 10 minutes after the exercise program. That then maximizes your fat burning potential. Now, after me telling you all of this, I'm also now going to tell you about intensity of exercise. So when we work really hard, okay, so say like we're doing a HIIT, okay, you're jumping up and down, then you recover. In that time, your body only wants to burn sugar, okay, because it needs instant energy. It will burn some fat, okay, that's great, but its fat burning continues up to 2 hours after your exercise program finishes. It works the same when we do barbell workout or dumbbell workout. So dumbbell workout and barbell workout are not high enough level, you know, to trigger the hormonal response for us to be able to go into fat burning. But once we've finished, it gets into our fat burning zone. And this then becomes fascinating because we don't need to eat sugar before we exercise. We need to make sure that our sugar stores in our blood, in our muscles, and in our liver are at maximum capacity, like your food cupboard before Christmas Day, so that you can access that food cupboard when you need to exercise. If, for example, you've been busy or you've been ill and you haven't had time to eat properly, then we need to look at ways that we can support your nutrition during your exercise program. I find this really fascinating. Now, I used to have really low blood sugar. Terrible. I mean, I would black out. I mean, I would become blind, but standing up, teaching classes. And it used to scare me so much. And I went into hospital for a week because they were really worried that, you know, this was not healthy. And what they found out was, it was the fact that I couldn't cope with sugar. My body didn't like high sugar level. The minute I had high sugar level, my insulin response was so rapid that I would be crashing blood sugar. And so the advice was to stop eating sugar. So this happened when I was about 23, 24. The advice then was stop eating sugar, which is why I had to teach myself to hate sugar. I still don't like sugar. Still don't like anything sugary. Stress needs us to have sugar, okay? and stress will also burn fat. But we'll have a look at that when we do the stress thing. Okay, so how can we have a look at the way that we can improve our nutrition? One of the hormones I talked about when you are coming to exercise or when you are feeling a bit anxious, a bit stressed, was cortisol. So how does cortisol and your food work? So cortisol in your body is designed to follow a predictable 24-hour pattern. We've talked about this before, because we know that cortisol makes us feel awake, improves what we call our metabolic function, how we use the fats and the sugars when we're exercising, as well as doing things like cognitive performance and immune regulation. Normal pattern is we have the highest levels between 6 and 8 a.m. in the morning. That keeps us alert, but also primes the blood sugar. Your blood is fully loaded when you first wake up between 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the morning. And no, there's a very good reason why we exercise before 8 a.m. because of this. What they find is, because cortisol is going like, come on, you're going to get up, you need to have everything ready. It releases hormones to tell the storage system to put the maximum amount of sugar into your bloodstream without it being problematic first thing in the morning. Champion. So you can get up, you can have no breakfast, you can do a 20-minute workout and a 10-minute walk and then eat. Because that's how we're supposed to be working. That's the good news. As cortisol falls throughout the day, it keeps our energy and our emotional regulation in balance, and it's at its lowest point at night, which allows another hormone called melatonin to come up and help us go to sleep. So when we have this good pattern, we have better metabolic health, we have high sugar when we're ready, and we're ready to go first thing in the morning, and we have lower energy needs in the evening, we can think clearly, and we have better stress. Food intake has a direct and indirect effect on cortisol, and these happen through the blood glucose control that we talked about, the stress response, what we call inflammation, and that rhythm. Okay, so when we have that rhythm out of sync, it affects our hormones. So the first thing that science has shown us is this. If we have irregular or inconsistent timing of meals, doesn't matter what time you have it, if it's the same every day, then it functions, because it kind of know when it's breakfast time or lunchtime. So large gaps between meals or unpredictable eating patterns can cause your cortisol to get out of sync. Low blood sugar, when you have low blood sugar, we know it triggers the release of cortisol and adrenaline to get the cortisol levels back up. And that can then mean when it comes to coming to bed at night, you're still wired and tired, and you need to have a look at the way that your food might be influencing your cortisol levels. So if you find that you have like very low energy in the afternoon, or you have disrupted sleep at night, then sometimes it's not only stress, it's sometimes to do with cortisol. And this pattern is more pronounced during perimenopause, okay, in the time leading up between anything between the ages of 40 and 50. It's because our own hormones are changing, and it influences what's called that HPA axis. If you came to the talk, it's the hyperpituitary adrenal axis. I hope I've remembered that right. And that means that we have this kind of sharper response or a worse response. Okay, so it's just not right. If we eat food that is high in sugar when we're a kid, okay, you show me any child, they can eat sugar, it's not a problem. If we eat high sugar in the peri and postmenopausal phases, we cannot manage it the same. It causes us to have these higher and lower spikes of insulin, which means that we are then triggering cortisol to release glucose from the liver. And so all of a sudden you start to see women in menopause having a high sugar craving. They crave more sweets, they crave more chocolates, they crave more cakes. And it's because we are got our system in a mess. Okay, we talked about knitting. It's like your wool being in a tangle, or you've done a hole and you've got to take it back. It increases our general fatigue, it increases our irritability, and it makes us feel rubbish halfway through the day. So at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night, we sit down on the sofa and we fall asleep. We don't want to be doing that. Here are some things that you can do to help. Number one, at the beginning of the talk, I told you that when we have our sugar levels dipping and dropping, we can get energy from protein and fats. We talked about fats, but protein is really interesting in the way it supports cortisol. So, protein helps with thyroid. All right? So, as somebody with a low thyroid, I absolutely make sure I have protein for breakfast because it helps with the conversion of what's called T4 to T3. Any breakfast should include around 20 to 30 for you in cafe because you're exercising, grams of protein to help stabilize early morning cortisol. This improves your blood glucose control, it improves your feelings of satisfaction that you've eaten well, and it reduces your kind of snacking kind of driver for sugar later in the day. So 30 grams of protein, and I've given you this into a handout before, is around 2 eggs and some smoked salmon, yogurt, nuts, some fruit and seeds, anything like that. If you have a look at the past cafes, I've probably given you that. And each of the meals I've given you in your meal plan will show you 30 grams of protein. The other thing that we have in the morning, of course, is caffeine. So if we have caffeine in the morning on an empty stomach, or caffeine late in the day, it can interfere with cortisol. Not for everybody, okay, because there's lots of little things to play. For example, if you've got ADHD, caffeine won't affect you at all. I don't know who's got ADHD, but that's one thing. But we want to make sure that when we have a coffee, we have it with food. So I've changed the way I have my morning things now. I have a cup of tea in the morning, and I have to force myself to finish my cup of tea. So I have a cup of tea, nothing else. I teach my class, and then I have my breakfast with my coffee. The thing I've noticed recently, though, is that because I've been training myself to do this for so long, that if I have my morning coffee on an empty stomach, I actually feel sick. It's weird, isn't it? The final part is where we eat our evening meal. Now, quite often, our evening meal is the big meal of the day. All right, so for me in particular, on a Tuesday night, that would mean I would be eating my main meal at 8:30 at night. That is not good because you need around 2 to 3 hours between your meal and going to bed. And I like to go to bed at 9 o'clock. So I always eat my main meal at lunchtime on a Tuesday. Okay, I can't on a Monday because I'm already teaching. But this way that we can have a main meal in the evening, especially if it's high in sugar or fat, can delay melatonin, can increase nighttime cortisol and can change the way our cortisol is influenced throughout the day. So we have less sleep, we have disrupted sleep, and we are in that tired and wired. So we want to have a look at the way that we can have protein-rich breakfast, that we have regular meal times. Doesn't matter what that is. So if you're somebody who is doing fasting, as long as it's your regular thing, that's fine. And then in the evening, we want to have a lighter, fibre-rich meal. We also want to have those omega-3s to help our cortisol and our cholesterol. One of the things that happens to us as females is that we have estrogen, or not having estrogen, and that influences and buffers that cortisol as well. So we find out both our sleep is disturbed and we have more dips in energy. So you might notice that you feel very tired, lethargic, that the mid-afternoon dips become worse. You might even have to have a nap. Nothing wrong with having a nap. But we have to think about the way that we want nutrition to help us. So consistent meal times means that we have better energy in the morning, we have steadier motivation, we have improved cognitive clarity, we have reduced cravings, we have more predictable sleep, as well as helping our kind of cholesterol and other metabolic markers. So protein, as we know, is essential for maintaining muscle tissue and supporting metabolic rate. And this relates to the amount of fibres within your muscle itself. So a muscle fibre is like a chain link. Okay, so think of it like a necklace with lots of chain links in it. The more we train the muscle to exercise and move and demand more energy, the more we pull protein into the muscle and we make more links in the chain. Okay, I always likened it to more engines to pull your train. Okay, so when we have that, when we're sitting down doing nothing, we are burning more calories because we have more muscle mass. You show me any thin person, they'll always complain of being cold. Okay, because they don't have the muscle mass to keep them warm. So when we have a look at the way that protein is essential for maintaining muscle tissue, supporting metabolic rate, and stabilizing our blood glucose, these three factors are so important during peri and postmenopause because the hormones change the way our body processes and uses these nutrients. So if we look at muscle maintenance, protein provides what are known as amino acids. Now, somebody quoted to me, yeah, but you need to eat meat because meat has all the amino acids you need. Okay, they do, all right? There's no two ways about it. If you eat meat, you have all of the required amino acids. If you don't eat meat, you can get all of the required amino acids. You just have to take it from different vegetables or plants. As we get older, muscle mass declines, and so we also want to help that by eating correct amount of protein. We know that muscle is metabolically active and we want to keep our metabolism going by having more muscle mass, hence why you do weights throughout the week. The problem is the fact is that we don't use protein as efficiently during menopause. And this is due to something called anabolic resistance. Now, this happens to anybody as we get older. So our body becomes less responsive to the signals to build muscle. So you have to eat more protein than you used to in order to stimulate the muscle to grow. We have to look at the ways that we keep protein ticking over throughout the day. And therefore, we require higher dose per meal of protein to trigger that, what they call protein synthesis. We also know that amino acids that are contained in the protein get transported into the muscle with estrogen. So without estrogen, we have that kind of less efficient kind of thing, which means that women, if they don't eat enough protein, will have a slower recovery from exercise, will ache for longer, will be fatigued for longer, and won't see as many strength gains without that protein there. So if you think like you're struggling to absorb protein, it's more about being able to use it. And the final thing is to do with our stomach acid. So our stomach acid naturally declines as we get older, which means it gets harder to break down protein. So if we think about eating a piece of chicken, we have to break it down into the amino acids. So if we eat all our protein in one meal, you might find that because we don't have the same amount of acid, you get a little bit more bloated, you feel really stuffed when you've eaten maybe a steak, and that also affects your absorption. So we have to have a look at ways of having lighter protein throughout the day. The final thing with protein, and I'm going to finish soon, is to do with the cortisol. When our cortisol becomes dysregulated, it increases the breakdown of muscle itself, and it reduces the uptake of those amino acids, and it shifts metabolism towards glucose, and it reduces muscle repair. So this means that when we're stressed, we have to eat more protein again. Now, in an ideal world, we will have a meal plan where we know what we're doing and we're on target and everything is organized. Now, as you know, I'm a slightly obsessive person, and I hate it when we go away on holiday or something and my diet is changed because I get bloated, I can't sleep at night, I get, oh my God, and I got no energy, I get low blood sugar. And when I'm teaching cafe, I'm really fussy because I can't wake up in the morning and kind of go like, oh, I'm too tired to teach today, or not be able to teach 5 different classes in one day, even if they're not 5 hours. Understanding my energy for me, as I told you, from the age of 24 to the age I'm nearly 64, has been 40 years of trial and error. And sometimes you learn more by error than by trial. And I found that I have to kind of stick to what I know works for me. And I also know when I eat things out of sync, I feel rubbish. So I can do it occasionally, right? But I don't want to do it forever. So sometimes we will have a Chinese. I will love having a Chinese. Oh my God, the next day I pay for it. So we have to make sure that we have Chinese on a Saturday night. So on Sunday, I can have my bloated belly and not on Monday when I'm teaching 5 classes. So final thing is, oh my God, 2 minutes. The other problem with being older is that we have low appetite in the morning, and often we're so busy that we haven't got time for a meal and we snack, and we have emotional kind of leaning towards sugar, carbohydrates, and we train consistently without refueling. These things really interfere. So I've given you a meal plan, okay? I've given you a shopping list, but you have to do it in a way that suits you, because there are real standards and scientific evidence about dietary references for intakes. And what I would say as a positive is this, and I've missed out half my talk because I think I've just gone into too much detail, is this. When I get my food right, okay, that's about 80% of the time, I can teach cafe and my classes and feel great. When I get it wrong, you all know I get sore throat because my immune system gets influenced. I still have the energy to do the exercises, but my cortisol levels are influenced, and therefore my immune system is influenced. And sometimes by week 6 on cafe, not last time, go me, my energy systems are influenced to the extent that, you know, my voice is tired. And I think that it's a really good test of my own knowledge, and it's been really interesting talking to all of you, kind of going, I can't wait for cafe to start because it keeps me focused. But my journey into cafe starts when I plan it, because I'm thinking like, okay, I've got to get everything in place so that when it's time for me to go, I'm ready and I'm organised and I'm on top of my game, and I will be strict to myself in going to bed early, in eating food at the right time, in making myself eat the right food, and making sure that my shopping is there. I don't snack sugar anymore, okay? I do like wine, and I don't eat crisps, and I don't eat sweets, but I do eat chips. I love chips. I love chips, I love cheese, okay? But I can't have chips and cheese and then, you know, exercise. So what I'm hoping with this is that it's made you realise that we can talk about exercise and we can say things like exercise is really good for you, this exercise really works, but unless you get your nutrition right, you are limited to how that happens, because your body has to have that energy system to do the work. All right, and we want it to burn fat when you're exercising, to continue burning fat for a while after you finished exercising, to repair the muscle, to make you stronger so you can do more exercise without feeling tired, that you don't have energy dips, that you sleep well, and when you wake up in the morning you feel bright and sparky and not worn out. Exercise alone will not give you that. If you don't understand how nutrition supports your exercise journey, you're missing a trick. Often food is seen as punishment, isn't it? I'm going on a diet, restrict, 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 and then I'm going back to what I like eating. This is not about how you feel about food. This is about understanding, if I want to become fitter, stronger, happier, sleep well, have lots of energy, think clearly, I need to see what I'm feeding my brain and my muscles and my everything else, whilst at the same time understanding my hormones are stopping. The things I used to take for granted when I was 20, you could eat anything, be skinny, go out partying all night, not have any sleep, go to work all day. I can't do that anymore. It's such a big subject. You can do whole degrees, you can do masters and PhDs on this. Just think about it in a logical way that's going to help you. If you're somebody who wants to do more in the cafe and you're struggling for energy, you need to look at your food first. If you're somebody who's having low blood sugar, you need to look at your food. If you don't sleep well, you need to look at your food. If you are weight training with me 5 times a week and you're not improving, you're not changing body shape or getting stronger, you need to look at your food. Get the message? All right, I'm now going to have cheese on toast, but with my wholemeal bread that I made myself, because I love making bread. It's a very good stress reliever. If you've got comments, please, please, please post them in. However, you will notice, normally after class I listen to your comments. No, because I need to go to bed in an hour, I have to prioritise my eating first before I answer your comments, but I will get back to you. I'll see you all tomorrow morning. We have kettlebells, and hope you enjoy that. Take care. Noswaith dda.